We're back again. Let's have a look at file management. So naming files and managing files is a necessary skill to have, not just in software development, but in general computer use. And I've often been surprised about how many of my students haven't really managed to capture that essential skill. So in this session, I'm going to be talking you through some of the rules that are needed when naming files. Rule 1 is all files will be named in lowercase. Rule 2, there will be no spaces in your file names. None. You're not writing a book here, you're writing a file. You have to put a space in, use a dash, a minus sign if you will. Rule 3, numerical characters in file names shall be avoided at all costs. 1, 2, 3, forget it. Rule 4, we will use periods, that's full stops to some of us, only when separating the file name from the file extension. Okay, so here I am on the Windows desktop. I realise some of you are going to be using Macs, you lucky dogs. Some of you might even be using Linux, who knows. The principles are going to remain the same. And strangely enough, I'm not going to be using the file manager for my file management. I'm actually going to be using Visual Studio Code, and the reason is that I find file manager kind of annoying and ugly, as you can see here. You will have to use it obviously if you're doing file management in general for other applications, but for development I would generally do it as much as possible inside Visual Studio Code, and then later on I would look at the command line. Obviously this is not something I'm getting into now, but in general those are the two ways that I do it: command line and Visual Studio Code. So let's get this out of the way and open up Visual Studio Code. And I realise you may not have looked at this before. Remember in the last session I did say this is what you should download. I'm hoping you watched that. If not, but here we have the basic Visual Studio layout. And on the right hand side I have my primary sidebar. And this is where most of the file management is going to be happening. However, for you it will probably be on the left. That's the only difference. This will probably be on the left side for you, this sidebar. Apart from that, this will look the same and the principles remain the same. Now, because this isn't an IDE, remember what an IDE is? It's an integrated development environment. Because it isn't an IDE, I can't create a new project. Because all this Visual Studio Code really is a fancy text editor with code highlighting and what have you. It's not really a full project-based IDE. So what we have to do is to create a new folder, and we do that by saying File. So we've got up here to the left, File, Open Folder. You'll see there's not a way here to create a new folder, so we're going to open the folder. The first thing I'm going to recommend you do here, as you can see, it opens up the Windows File Manager. Windows File Manager. Again, in the Mac, it will open up the appropriate window there. But the first thing I'd recommend you do is just right-click on an empty space inside the window, go to New. I would advise you to put a folder in here like I have. See it? I've got one called Repos inside Thomas Sweeney. Thomas Sweeney is my home folder, and I've got this project folder called Repos, and this is where I put all my projects. Simple as that. So let's create a new folder, and I'll just call this File Management Practice. Management Practice. And right away you'll see there's no spaces between the words. Say I'm using a dash, I'm using a minus sign. Excellent, we've got that selected, and we can just hit Select Folder down here on the left. And that's it, the folder is now opened inside Visual Studio Code. But of course we don't have anything inside the folder yet, do we? And so this is where we can create files over here in the file management section of the primary sidebar. So by right clicking here, seeing I right click on an empty space, I can create a new folder, I can create a new file. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it index.html. Now you remember what I told you there, we shouldn't be using capitals, remember? And we should only use dots to separate the file name from the extension. So index.html. All lowercase, always lowercase. So it's actually opening the file inside Visual Studio. And we could add text here, we could add HTML, what have you. We're not going to do that yet. We're just going to close that off. We're focusing on file management here because this is incredibly important. And it's one of these skills that's going to do you going forward, no matter what you do. So here we have this index.html file inside this file management folder. In fact, I can right click here and it'll reveal it in File Explorer. See, so we've got this file management practice folder, and inside we've got this index.html file. What we may want is a CSS file as well. So let's create one called style.css. Again, all lowercase. If you look here, these two, go back in here, these two are in the same folder. Okay, sitting beside each other. Okay, so this is a web project. What if I wanted, say, images? Now, the best thing for me to do here is to actually add a new folder, not just click and dragging the files in, the image files. I want to actually add a new folder, and I can simply call those images. Again, all lowercase, no spaces, none of this. I don't want to see that. Okay, images. And that's great. And if we go into our File Explorer, you see it's created the folder inside there. So we've got this hierarchy now. We've got this folder called File Management Practice, and inside it we have index.html, we have style.css, and we have this images folder with no images in it as of yet. This is great. We're keeping things nice and tidy. Now, as our site grows, we might have more than just one HTML file. In fact, we'll probably have multiple pages. And so, this is where we'd add more HTML files. That's a new file. And supposing you wanted to say a contact page on your website, you would have contact.html. All lowercase, no spaces. What about, let's see, an about page. So that'd be about.html. About, contact, what else could we have? Say, if you're a business, you would have a services, HTML. Perhaps you would have products.html. Okay, so you can see what's happening here. This is starting to get a bit mixed up. Okay, we've got a lot of stuff in here. You can imagine if we put our images in here and there'd say our JavaScript in here as well. In fact, let's add a new file. We'll call it something like script.js. So if we come into our File Explorer again, you can see all of these are at the same level. They're all in the same folder. And realistically, what we want is we want to start segmenting this out. We want to create files within folders, appropriate folders, just as you would put things in appropriate drawers. Okay? You want to create appropriate folders for your appropriate files. Keep everything bunched together so we can find it again, nice and easily. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this, what could I call this? I want to put my HTML files in here, so I could call it HTML, or I could say pages. Now, what do I want to do here? I want to select my HTML files, don't I? And I can do that just by selecting one, hitting Control, and just selecting the files that I want to move. Put those into pages. Yes. Are you sure you want to move the following 4 files into pages? Yes, I do. And you can see what's happened here. Let's put them inside this pages folder. And you can see why I like using this instead of the file manager, because the file manager doesn't really show that same hierarchy. Whereas you can see here, these are indented to represent them being inside that folder. So it's a lot easier to see where they are. In fact, we can just close that folder there, open it up, and we can see that those files are inside. You're probably noticing as well I didn't put this index.html inside this pages folder. The simple reason is that we need an entry point. Obviously, this is something that we're going to have to go into in depth, but your index.html file is your entry point for your website, no matter what. Okay, so we always need an index.html, and we always need that in the root folder. And our root folder is, we come back into our file explorer, it's called File Management Practice. This is our root folder. It's right at the top, and it contains all the individual folders and files of our project. What else have we got here? So we've got our style sheet and our script. I think we should put those in folders. So a new folder, and I'm going to call it style. In fact, let's call it CSS. And we'll just put a style.css inside there. Yes, I want to move that. And I'm going to create a new folder again. Remember, nice and easy. We just right click and an empty space here. Go to new folder. And I'm going to call this JS for JavaScript. In fact, because I'm naming these folders appropriately, you can actually see that I'm getting nice little icons here. See that? I've got the CSS icon inside this folder and the JavaScript icon for that folder there. So let's just grab this script.js and put it inside this folder here. Yes, move it. And we can basically just close these off, but you can see exact same files, but just a lot cleaner, a lot tidier. Everything's compartmentalized and everything is named appropriately. And that's our start. Okay, that's how we're going to begin every project going forward. And that is the basics of file management. So in this session, I talked a bit about file management and file naming. And again, these are the essential skills that you're going to need going forward. Thankfully, now we've got that out of the way, in the next session, I'm going to be looking at HTML. Again, from the absolute start. So I hope you join me then. See ya.